This is Rick LaLiberty with Treaty 10 News at CIPI TV here in Beauval. And today we're covering a very informative session on scams, phishing, and all the fraud that's being tried on our communities through the different platforms that we have. So today we have Greg Jacobs. If you would introduce yourself, Greg, and give us your position and who you work for.
Really? Well, first off, thanks for having me, Rick. I'm Greg Jacobs. I am an external communications manager with SaskTel, and I've spoken about this topic with media relations outlets all across the country, specifically in Saskatchewan.
So, Greg, these scams, uh, technology has taken it to a different level, I believe. There used to be just here and in between, and sometimes we look at it as big city problems as well because living in a small village. But everybody carries a platform now, from your iPhone to your emails. What do you see that has come up in the last while that we should be very, very, very concerned about?
I think you hit the nail on the head there, Rick, with technology has made the world a global village. The benefits of telephone and internet is that it connects us to our friends, family in the world. But one of the downsides is it also allows scammers and fraudsters to connect with and target victims or potential victims. And so, really, what we've seen more recently is an uptick in targeted scams that will use those pieces of technology to try to victimize individuals who may not be aware or may not be as well versed in what types of scams are out there. Generally speaking, there's sort of three types of scams that we'll see that would impact our industry. And it is really a national problem and an industry problem. It just doesn't impact SaskTel customers. It impacts customers of any telecommunications and any internet service provider across the country. So we'll see telephone scams where someone phones you out of the blue. We'll see text message scams where you'll receive a text message asking you to click a link or do some sort of action. And then similar to that, we'll see email scams, commonly referred to as phishing scams as well. And again, similar to a text message, they're usually asking you to click on a link or do something or engage with them in another way, shape, or form.
Just a little bit more on this technology and how they're using it. When you say phishing, so
Mhm.
you receive an email, and what technically happens there? It's like an email, unopened email.
Mhm.
Uh, what happens when you open it? What is the technical connection that they're making with you when you actually open an email?
It depends on the scam, but it's really quite related to the name, fishing. It's kind of like you're out on the lake and you're fishing. You're throwing something out there and hoping somebody bites. So it depends on what the fraudster or the bad actor is after. But if you get a suspicious email, it's usually one of a few things is what they're looking for. They will either ask you to click on a link that would take you to a website that might look like a legitimate website, but it's tracking your actions. So if it's asked you to put in a username or a password or credit card information, it's tracking that information so that if you've completed that, they now have more information on you that they might be able to commit a larger scam or a larger fraud down the line. Alternatively, if you get a suspicious email and it asks you to download an attachment or something along those lines, what it might be trying to get you to do is actually download virus or malware software that then will infect your device that might give those bad actors full access to the device that you're using. So they're not necessarily after financial information that they can gain from you at that moment, but they're going to start tracking what you're doing so they can get as much from you as possible. They're really just trying to fish to see what they can get out of you.
Well, the other question that comes into mind here is when we speak about this technology and connecting links. So
Mhm.
if you look at a website and an actor, a bad actor, can create a
Mhm.
button that says maybe deposit money, but
Mhm.
actually that deposit is commanding a malware upload or download, however you want to look at it. But those buttons are manipulated by the bad actors to do different functions, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. It really just depends on what the outfit is after at that point. Generally speaking, they want information out of a victim that they can use to action some type of scam, whether it's financial, identity theft, or something else that they're after. They will manipulate what they've sent you or where they're trying to direct you to make it look like something that you should be doing or you should be clicking on or you should be engaging with. They can mimic a bank or a service provider or a number of potentially trusted businesses.
Well, the other experience that we had in our family was they did get access to the account. It's account control, I believe they got,
Yeah.
and we had enough time to try and stop it. Call your bank right away if that happens. But the other part is they could take your information and ID theft and start opening other accounts, either Visa or mortgages or anything, right? They could
Yep.
use your ID to log in more. So is that something that is new now, or is that was always part of their operations?
Your personal information has always been targeted by a fraudster. Technology just has changed the way that they're going about and collecting this information now. Prior to an internet connection, prior to ubiquitous telephone service, someone might try to steal your wallet, so they can get your your driver's license, your social insurance number, and those other pieces of personal identification that would allow them to maybe do um, you know open a mortgage or do some other financial fraud against you. We've moved to more of a digital world, so the scammers have also moved to more of a digital delivery of their scams and their criminal activity. At the end of the day, let's be clear, these are criminals that are committing crimes. It's not, you know, it's not a bad actor or it's not a cute term. They are criminals.
So in terms of that criminality that's taking place, what is the legal foundation to fighting back to this? Is it federal laws, provincial laws? I'm not sure if there's international laws because where are these actors coming from? It's something that we don't know. Is it something you can shed some light on?
That's a very good point. A lot of times, the activity that we see is not does not originate from Saskatchewan, does not originate from Canada, and does not originate from North America. Now, SaskTel in itself is not a legal entity, so we can't go around and provide legal advice or legal context. What we can say, and what we do encourage all of our customers, is that if you feel that you have fallen victim to a scam, uh, whether it's personal or digital in nature, you should be reporting that to your local law enforcement. You can also report that to the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center. Obviously, local law enforcement is to uh, go through the legal system. The Canadian Anti-Fraud Center tracks scams and other activity along those lines at a national level and helps and works with law enforcement to bring down these larger rings that are perpetrating these crimes.
Yes, we have the website. It's www.antifraudcenter.ca. And phone number that we logged off was 1-888-495-8501. So this is the Canadian Fraud Center. And so any activity that you feel was attempted on you or succeeded on you, that's the place to call to report it.
If you think you've fallen victim to a scam, that's when you should report to your local law enforcement. If you got a suspicious phone call, but you didn't lose any information, or you're pretty confident that nothing happened as a result, I don't think you'd really want to report that to the police because they have a very large caseload. They're more interested in investigating crimes that have occurred instead of near misses. But you can report all of that activity to the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center so that they can track it and they can help law enforcement bring down some of those larger rings.
Do you know of any I guess legal implications or charges that have been laid to people conducting these fraud activities? I know that it's extortion. That's a legal issue of coercing money off people and steal. They're literally stealing. So, is there
Mhm.
any success stories of catching these people that you know of?
I have seen some articles in the last 12 to 24 months of larger call center scams being shut down. Nothing comes to mind specifically, but there have been some successful law enforcement actions that we've seen recently. And as they get more information, it becomes easier to take down some of these rings.
Yeah, in terms of the, I guess, the technology as well, uh, SaskTel has developed and expanded, and maybe you can explain this 3G, 4G, 5G. I know from a flip phone, what are those G categories, and just so people have an idea, because the more G's you have, that's the fraudsters have more ammunition as well, right? So if we understand the technology, maybe it'll clarify some of our misconceptions of how safe we are.
Certainly. So, there's two things I'll talk about related to connectivity, is what I'll say. So on the cellular side, on the wireless side, we've gone through a few different iterations of the wireless network. So when we're talking about 3G, 4G, and 5G, what we're talking about is the generation of network. So 3G was the third generation of wireless technology. 4G, which is primarily in use throughout Saskatchewan today, was the fourth generation of technology, of wireless technology. And we are starting to roll out the fifth generation of wireless technology today, our 5G network. Now, there are a number of differences, but the primary difference between each generation is the speed at which we can transfer data. So a 3G connection cannot connect you as fast as a 4G connection, as fast as a 5G connection. So what we're talking about now with 5G is near real-time connectivity, in that there's really no lag when you're doing a data session. If you're connecting with a website or using other sort of data services, FaceTime calls, as we're doing over here, a Zoom call. That's really what the big differentiator is between the generations of wireless technology, is that it can connect you faster than the previous generation. The other side of that, or the other topic, is internet connectivity. As a telecommunications provider, we look at wireless connectivity and internet connectivity separately. What we would consider internet connectivity or broadband is the internet connection you have in your home. And as those pieces of equipment and that technology has upgraded and kept up with demand, you've seen faster connection speeds in your home. So very similar to how wireless networks have allowed you to connect faster than before, your home internet connection is allowing you to connect faster than before as well. But the reverse of that is, when you can connect faster, you can connect more. Bad actors rely very much so on digital connectivity. So if you're connecting more than you used to be, you might be connecting more with bad actors than they may have had access to you in the past.
So it's a double-edged sword, right? You get better service, faster service, but you're also more exposed.
There is the good and bad of connectivity. It is, it connects you to healthcare and education, economic opportunities, loved ones, but it does open up the opportunity for a bad actor to reach out and connect with their victims.
Well, the other, it's not really the hacking side, but on the TikTok world, we hear in the news about, the Chinese government using it as surveillance tool. And a friend of mine come and visit me, and he said, "Look at this. I use TikTok," he says. And we started talking about this hacking and scamming process. He says, "Hey, give it a half hour or an hour. I will get a message from TikTok that's relevant to the topic we're discussing right now. They're listening to our voice," he said. Is that what you see as well in some of these? It's not necessarily a scam, but the apps that are being used, are these algorithms designed to access your information for either selling ads or whatever? But right, sure enough, it was about 40 minutes later, a scamming report came on his TikTok screen. What do you know about that type of apps that, we don't expect them, but they may be manipulating us?
So there is technology built into devices and in applications to track someone's usage, but there's a significant difference between the concerns around an app like TikTok, where the concern being that it's tied to the Chinese government and concerns around national security about what they may or may not be tracking. That's why you will have seen the federal government and our provincial government and other governments banning the use of TikTok for government-owned devices. SaskTel is very much the same. Our employees cannot use TikTok on a corporate device to fall in line with the provincial direction, which came shortly thereafter, the federal direction. So there's one side. There's concern that an application's tracking your usage for poor purposes or negative purposes. On the other side, if let's say you've downloaded an application that's a game or an application about mapping or things like that, generally speaking, there might be wording in the terms and conditions that allow it to track elements of your phone or certain things that your phone is doing so that it can improve the way that it, in their opinion, serves you. So if you are looking to purchase a wheelbarrow and you've searched wheelbarrow on Google a few times, it definitely does have the knowledge and the capability to track that and say, okay, well, this is what you're looking for. Here is something that you might be interested in. And it can do that across a number of things. It just really depends on, the application and the purpose of it. It's not necessarily something to be all that concerned about. It just depends on the type of application, because there is a distinct difference between a malicious application or a potentially malicious application and a consumer-focused application that's just trying to provide a service to a consumer or an improved experience to a consumer.
Just in terms of, I guess, the bad actors, phishing, as you mentioned, was one of the terminology they use. The other one is service scams. If somebody has a service for you, a false promise or a false promo, you want a trip and we need you to send money. That's been a classic one. And then you also have the prize, as you said, you'll collect, but you got to send money.
Yep.
And then there's a recovery scam as well, where you may be been scammed, but then somebody's offering help to help you recover. And so it's double trouble. These, they don't quit. But
No.
as you said, as we were talking about, where are these mostly originating from? Who's trying this? Is it a small town village, somebody hacking out there, or is it a big operation where it's like an organized crime that they're all trying to do it? And then you also have the world affairs between Russia and China, the situation in the geopolitical world. Is this impacting or increasing these kind of activities now?
That would be a better question for law enforcement than it would be for us. We can only track these things so far. And because we're not a law enforcement agency, we don't have the international connections to track these things down. What our focus is protecting our customers for when these activities do come and target our region or our customers for one reason or another. I just can't really comment on, where this primarily comes from, just because I don't have that knowledge base or enough experience to speak on that.
Well, the other one, it's income tax season, right? So Canadian Revenue Agency and the government being at odds with its workers right now with the strikes position that they have. I suppose the CRA option of people going online, if you've picked out a website and you're trying to log in your information, it may be a bogus site, some cases. How do you confirm if it's a real site or a bogus site?
So there's a few things you can do. One thing to keep in mind is that there's a couple of things. There's a couple of things to keep in mind. These bad actors and these criminals, they don't get paid unless they're successful. So they are going to be persistent and they are going to do as much as they can to make their product as convincing as possible. Because if they're not successful, they're not getting paid. You also have to keep in mind, is the interaction I'm going about, or is the request that has been asked of me, something I would expect to be asked of me from a particular business. We're at tax time right now. Bad actors know that. So they may try to use this period of time to, float out information about, a severe audit coming your way. In order to protect yourself, you have to do XYZ real quick, or you haven't submitted your taxes yet. Click on this link to do that. Bad actors are people, so they are just as aware of what's going on in the world as any person is. So they'll use that as to their advantage and try to target some of their scams and some of their activity to be more convincing. Now, if you're looking at a website, there are a few telltale things that you can look for to see if it is a legitimate website or not. First and foremost, if you received an email out of the blue and unexpectedly asking you to go visit a site, there's a couple of things there. First and foremost, I would look at the address at which that email is coming from. If you look at most email platforms, they will have a short name in the from section. Let's say it's cra@canada.ca. But if you take your mouse and you hover over that, it will display what the actual address is. And if the actual address, the actual origination of that email does not line up with the email address it says it's coming from, or it's trying to display, that's a red flag that is not a legitimate email. Further, if you go to an organization's website or a potential organization's website, I'd pay very close attention to the address in your URL bar. Because again, if that URL doesn't really line up with what you would expect from that agency, again, you're pretending it's supposed to be an email from or a web page from Government of Canada, but that URL has nothing about the Government of Canada, or it doesn't match what the Government of Canada's other websites look like, or their URLs look like, that's a big red flag. Same thing with SaskTel. If a scammer is pretending to be from SaskTel, but their URL has nothing to do with SaskTel or doesn't conform with, our normal URL guidelines, it's probably not a legitimate page. The other thing you can do, and this is pretty basic, but honestly, it's kind of like professional sports. Professional athletes are really good at what they do because they do the basics extremely well. They do the other stuff very well too, but they have the basics down. When protecting yourself, you have to have the basics down. One of the basics is ensuring that website, if it's laid out in English, it shouldn't have any grammatical errors. It shouldn't have any obvious spelling mistakes. It shouldn't have any obvious or poor word choices, or other things that you would expect an organization or a government to have caught before publishing it. If you see those things, bad spelling, bad grammar, poor design, it gives you a reason to pause and have a second thought. Is this legitimate or not?
Well, I guess the basic is don't give your information out, period, right? If
There is that, yes.
if you give on that rule, then the people, either the bank that's trying to get a hold of you, usually they're not texting you, they're not doing, if it's either in the mail, they'll send you a letter if it's CRA. But the other part is if somebody does text you, and you mentioned on the email you hover over the name to get the complete address. On a text, your website says tap on the name to show the full name. Is that one way of finding out on a text if it's legitimate or not?
Text messages are a little bit different because usually text messages will come from a short code. So it may not conform to normal phone number guidelines. It may not be 306 something, something, something. It may be a short code. But in that case, you really have to ask yourself, would this organization that's connecting with me or supposedly connecting with me, do they normally connect with me in this way? If they never have before, that's a big red flag. Do you think they have your phone number? Because, unless you've given them your phone number, there's no way for them to have acquired it and attached it to your name. And if it's an organization that might reach out to you via text message, but this is a new message and it doesn't use the same short code as previous messages from them, that's another red flag. I will get text messages from certain organizations, but they all come from the same short code. So when I get one from that organization, it just falls into the same conversation or text message conversation that I've had with them previously. If this is net new, then that's a red flag for something to keep in mind.
Yeah, I guess that's the other example that we were shared with up here was the bogus website of even booking a hotel room.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, you don't know if it's the real one. They look the same, but they ask for your credit card information. They ask for the booking dates. Everything
Mm-hmm.
is on there. You're giving them all the information, but it was a bogus site. So that's why looking at the real address and scrutinizing is probably the basics that you're talking about. Is everybody should be able to learn how to do that.
Absolutely. And it's important to know these things not only um, because it helps improve your safety and security, but technology will never be a silver bullet to protect you from every scam that's out there. Because, like I said before, these fraudsters, these criminals, they're not going to get paid unless they're successful. So they're going to continue to evolve their tactics. They're going to continue to make their scams better and change them from time to time. So if you know, generally speaking, what to look for, you're far more protected than any piece of technology is ever going to do. Technology is great for filtering out some of this stuff and filtering out some of the noise, but something is going to reach an individual at some point. So if you have that understanding that, hey, this isn't normal, or this has me questioning whether or not this is legitimate, you're going to be far more protected than if you just kind of follow through with the steps.
In terms of, I guess, preparing people for, whatever technology is going to throw at us
Mhm.
ahead of us, what are, do we need 5G connection on everything? If people are just using at home for a phone, can they go back to the old 3G or the flip phone? Are those capabilities still there, by SaskTel that you don't have to carry a full computer on your hand with an iPhone 14, right? Do you have options to pare down the information where people can still just use a phone and be less susceptible to the scamming or frauding?
So I understand what you're saying. So generally speaking, as new networks come out, older networks need to be shut down over time just because there's only so much space on a tower to have the equipment necessary. So not that we're anywhere close to turning down 3G. At some point, 3G will go away, very similar to how the CDMA network went away as the 4G network evolved and required more space. So, eventually older networks get turned down, meaning that those who may not necessarily want the instantaneous connectivity that 5G or 6G or 7G is going to offer, they would still give them an option to move to a lower generation of the network. But really, at the end of the day, it's how you use the technology more so than anything. Like I said before, although a downside of connectivity is that bad actors and criminals can reach out to victims, it opens the door to so many other opportunities. When you're talking about healthcare, when you're talking about education, you're talking about economic opportunities, you're talking about social opportunities. Technology has a number of benefits and it offers a number of benefits to its users. It's just really a matter of how you use that and having an understanding of how to protect yourself in using these pieces of technology is really key and will be key, continue to be key moving forward so that you don't have to be afraid of technology.
Well, as part of this, we talked about malware where you open up a
Mhm.
website and people could have access with a Trojan horse or whatever whatever you call those applications that they put in your computer. The other one is they take account control. They can take control of your bank account.
Mhm.
But another one is giving permission to control your computer, like
Mhm.
in terms of troubleshooting, maybe viruses. You find somebody offering some kind of service and you'll give them control of your entire computer. So these are, well, these are the different tools they're using to have access to you. So I guess, a lot of people weren't aware of this as they were getting into this technical world of, the iPhone, the laptops, and also the iPads. But the other part, is there any danger with the smart TVs? Is there anything? I notice Netflix is changing its accounts. Now you have to, you can't share so many, so people are re-entering that information, but it's entered into the smart TV. Is there any history of fraudulent activities coming from the smart TV world?
I'm not aware of anything specifically targeting smart TVs. At the end of the day, it's a connected device, so
Yeah.
there is the potential. But when you compare what you can do with a smart TV or even a smart dongle that turns a regular TV into a smart TV, with what you can do with your phone, the capabilities of a smart TV are quite limited. So it's not likely that it's going to be the first route of attack for a bad actor, because you may be able to get someone's Netflix login, but you can't really go any further than that. It adds a piece to the puzzle. And that's a lot of times what bad actors, criminals are trying to do. They're trying to build a profile on a victim so that as they collect information, they're going to be able to commit a larger fraud or a larger scam against them. But because it is a connected device, it is probably worth protecting that device in the similar way that you would protect other connected devices.
Well, with the 5G world coming in with, beyond the phone, beyond your computer, some of these are smartphones now connecting your heating system, your security system, your camera systems. So all this technical world is growing, but the bad actors, like you said, they're growing with that technology, and they're being creative, and they're
Mhm.
there to get you.
Yep. Yep.
So in closing, I guess, Greg, what haven't we covered that we should be aware of? And it's protecting ourselves, it's protecting our families, and they'll come through the kids' apparatus if they have to, if you're connected to that. But the other part I had, aside from that, I forgot to ask you, is there
Hmm.
anything in the router that people having access to that router, can they get access to multiple devices that are connected to that router?
So there is security built into your router. More modern pieces of equipment are called a gateway. They have the modem and the router built in to one unit. Um, but there's security that you can, those devices come with default security. If you want the most secure connection from your router or your gateway, you can increase the the security as much as possible. I believe the most secure at the moment is WPA2. I could have that acronym incorrect, but there's about 3 levels of security. One is open, so meaning that you don't require a password to log into your Wi-Fi network. There's sort of the medium security that allows a little more connectivity, still requires a password. And then there is the um, highest level of security, which actually makes it difficult to connect some devices to it because it doesn't trust those devices. But it's the most difficult for a bad actor to then hack into your modem and then try to connect to the other devices that's connected to it. Now, we've talked a little bit about, or we've danced around a little bit of, and these are some of the scary things, but there are some very basic things that you can do to protect yourself as much as possible. And if there's time, I can touch on some of those because I think that's really what is important for your listeners to understand. We've talked about some of the scary things out there, but there are some very basic things you can do to protect yourself. So, what first and foremost, we talked a lot about connected devices. We talked about our modem. We talked about Netflix accounts. One way to protect yourself, and again, this goes back to the basics, is you need to have a strong and a unique password for your online accounts. So what I mean by that is, if I have a Netflix account, my Netflix account password should not be something that's easy to guess. It should not be something that I use for every online account, because if a bad actor gets a hold of one of those accounts or one of those password. They're going to try on other common accounts. And so that's why you need a unique password. When it comes to digital passwords, the general rule of thumb is the longer it is, the stronger it is. Length when it comes to password is important to, as well as complex, how complex it is. But the longer it is, the longer it would take a bad actor to use software to crack it, because you just exponentially increase the potential combinations that it can be. So strong, unique passwords for all digital accounts. Usually the first question people ask is, well, I have 15, 20, 30 online accounts or connected devices. How do you manage passwords like that? There are applications you can download, password managers that you can download. There's also a concept you can use called a passphrase for these accounts. A passphrase, generally speaking, is a random set of words that wouldn't necessarily mean anything to a bad actor, but they will have some meaning to the user. So for instance, let's say I do some online shopping for clothes, and I recently bought a blue suit from an online outfit. One password that would make sense to me, but would not make sense to anybody else is, handsome blue suit. So lengthwise, you've got a password that's 12 to 15 characters very quickly. If I add in some numbers, some letter or some capitals, some lowercase, that becomes a very strong password. And that has no context and no meaning to a potential bad actor, but it has meaning to me. So if you apply that knowledge or that sort of concept with your other online accounts, it becomes a little bit easier to remember them, especially as you multiply the number of accounts that you have. It's not foolproof. That's why there's other ways to track passwords, but that's one way or one thing you should consider. Now, there's other things that we would encourage everybody who uses the internet or online accounts for. There is something called two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication. You often see this with banks. You can do this with SaskTel as well. What it will do is, if you try to log on to a trusted account, it will require a second step to authenticate you. Oftentimes, that second step is either that organization will either send you a text message or an email with a specific code, and it's a unique code, and it changes every time you try to log in, and it will not let you into that account until you provide that code. So you've added another layer of protection. In Saskatchewan, in winter, what the rule of thumb is, you layer up so that you're as warm and as you're protected as possible. When it comes to digital security, layers of security is also a good idea. Adding to the layer of security, having spyware, antivirus, malware protection on your connected devices, on your laptops, things like that. It's always a good idea. They're not foolproof and they won't protect you from everything, but it's another layer of protection that will help filter out some of this activity, some of these bad actors from reaching out to you. And another really big one that we see a lot of people do mindlessly without thinking about it is sharing too much information about themselves on social media. So when I talk about scams and what a bad actor or what a criminal is after, it's rarely the case that they're going to hit a home run off you the first time they try to victimize someone. They're trying to build a profile, and they're trying to gobble up as much information as they can so that when they want to commit some sort of financial crime or some other crime against you, they have all their ducks in a row that make it very easy for them to do it, or make it easier for them to do it. Well, one of the ways they can collect information from you is the information that you put out online freely. So things like your birth date, where you went to high school, where you work, the fact that you're going to go on vacation in a week, and you're going to be gone for 2 weeks. This brand new 60-inch high definition 4K TV that you just bought. You might be excited about those things, but talking about them on social media can make you a target and can make it easier for bad actors to target you. So I would be careful with the information that you would share on social media, because you're not just sharing it with your network, you're sharing it with the world. And the world, unfortunately, contains many, many bad actors. So some of those are some of the basic things that you can do to protect yourself. One of the other things that is somewhat related there, but isn't entirely, but is equally important, and it's more relevant to telephone scams, is you have to, if you're getting a call or an email out of the blue and it's asking you to do something out of the ordinary, or it's put a very compressed time frame on it, or it's trying to entice you, you have to have that filter to think, is this an expected communication? Like, did I really win a contest that I don't remember entering? Or would CRA ask me to pay my overdue tax bill, which I didn't know I was overdue, in iTunes gift cards? If you're getting a phone call from an unknown number, there's no harm in letting that go to voicemail. Goes to voicemail, you can listen to it then, and if it's not legitimate, you can ignore it and move on. Or, and we haven't seen this activity all that recently, but about a year ago, we did have a lot of calls coming into the province that appeared to come from international destinations. The world has become a global village. Saskatchewan has become a far more multicultural province since I was a kid. But I still don't really expect to get a call from Zimbabwe or the United Arab Emirates or Germany or Switzerland on a daily basis. So if I'm getting a call from one of those numbers, or Alabama, because I've gotten some calls from Alabama, I, with a high degree of certainty, think that's a scam and would simply ignore that call, because there's no reason that someone from those parts of the world should be calling me. So if your listeners are in sort of the same boat, I don't know anybody in this country, or don't have anybody in this country, there's probably no reason for someone from in that country to call you. And if they do, and there's a reason for them to call you, they'll leave you a message.
Yeah, I guess the other unsuspecting angle, you can look at a fraudulent actor trying to get access to you, but they may have hacked somebody already, and they're using those contacts. And that was a recent experience we had this week in one of our working circles here. One of our colleagues got hacked, and they were sending messages through her email asking for gift cards.
Yep.
And so you look at it, it's a legitimate email coming from that person, but anytime they ask for money, I think you have to confirm, as you said, the second layer, phone them. If they don't answer, don't send anything at all. It's, if it's an emergency, they'll get a hold of you through landline or whatever. But that's what I saw was through another person's contacts. You couldn't discriminate. It's a real email coming from that real email account, but it's been hacked.
Yeah, and you've hit the nail on the head there too. We've seen that activity before, where they're trying to compromise someone's email account so that they can increase the authenticity of the emails they're going to send out. But again, at the end of the day, two things: is this a request I would expect to come from Rick, or from Greg, or from another individual? And even if it is, it probably doesn't hurt for me to pick up the phone and phone them and say, hey, is this a legitimate email? That actually goes similar for unexpected emails from businesses. If you get, let's say, an email saying it's coming from SaskTel and it's threatening you because apparently you're several $100s behind your bill and you didn't know about it and you weren't expecting it, it never hurts to pick up the phone and phone the company and say, hey, I got this email. Is this a legitimate thing, or is this a scam? Worst case scenario, it's legitimate, and then you can work with them to figure out what the situation is. If it's not legitimate, you can delete it, you can move on. One thing I would caution though is if that email or that communication has a number in it to call, I would avoid using the number that they ask you to use.
Okay.
I would navigate to the company's known website and use the information on their website. So for instance, SaskTel, we have a very easy number. It's 1-800-SaskTel. If anyone's trying to get you to call anything other than 1-800-SaskTel to work with SaskTel, it's probably not legitimate. And a lot of businesses would be very much the same. Banking, government, they would all have that information publicly available. And it's usually very easy to connect with them in those realms because they want it to be easy for you to connect with them because they want to serve you and they want to ensure that you don't fall victim to some of these things.
So 1-800-SaskTel,
Mm-hmm.
the number to call if people are experiencing any kind of activity, somebody attempting or somebody successful, they should let you know as well, for sure. If somebody's got access to your bank account, call your bank. So make sure these numbers are readily available to you. If you have multiple bank accounts or different banks, make sure you have the contact numbers. And then the other one about ID theft is Equifax and the credit bureaus have to be notified because somebody could continue applying in your name with your profile to get other accounts. So you have to let these other people know. So I don't have those numbers readily available, but I'll try and log them in here. It's Equifax, and I think there's another credit bureau that's operates in Canada. I think those two have to be notified.
The other one's called TransUnion, and you're right. They're if you think that you have fallen victim or you have confirmation you've fallen victim, you definitely want to put some type of fraud report or alert on those accounts so that if they do try to impact your credit in another way, you'll find out, and you're not the last to know in that case.
Well, Greg, it's been sad to say, enlightening to know about the potential dangers that we're exposed to with this technology that we all depend on now. And SaskTel for providing the service. I know you're playing a responsible role in getting this information out. Thank you for giving us this interview today. But in closing, as we said, is there anything on your mind, top of mind, or anything we didn't cover just in closing that we want to make sure people understand?
There's two other things I'll share. And we talked about this a little bit, but I think it's worth repeating. And that is, if you think that you've fallen victim to a scam, please report it to local law enforcement. There can be some embarrassment that you fell victim to something that, maybe you're a little bit embarrassed about, or you talk to somebody and you shouldn't have fallen victim to. You have to protect yourself. And the best way to do that is report it to local law enforcement. You can also report them to the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center. The other thing I'll share is that we have a lot of information on our website about scams, various types of scams that are going on, and ways to protect yourself. This past March, we actually ran a campaign that talked about some of the tips that I've just shared on how to protect yourself from these things. It's a problem that impacts customers of all telecommunications providers, but as Saskatchewan's Crown Corporation, we feel it's necessary that we take the extra step to provide some of this information so that our customers are informed and so that they can protect themselves and take some proactive measures in protecting themselves. So we do have quite a bit of information on the website, and I'll share the links with you afterwards, Rick.
Okay, once again, thank you, Greg Jacobs. In your position there, Greg, is how do we find you if we look for you again?
External Communications Manager with SaskTel.
External Relations Manager, okay. And SaskTel provides a wealth of services, and but the website, like you said, if people want to know more about scams or frauds, go to the SaskTel website, and there is detailed information. And the Canadian Fraud Center, once again, is www.antifraudcenter.ca, and we'll provide that information here. So in closing, this is Rick LaLiberty at CIPI TV. And on behalf of Treaty 10 News, we want to thank you, all our listeners up here that are vulnerable to this threat, Greg. But we thank you for the information you shared today.
Thank you very much for having me. Take care.
Hey, what's that?